Let's rewind the clock to around 931 BC. King Solomon dies, and with that, boom, the United Kingdom of Israel splits in two. On one side, you've got the northern kingdom, still called Israel, now ruled by a king named Jeroboam. And on the other side, the southern kingdom, Judah, ruled by King Solomon's son, Rehoboam. Now this is where things get interesting. Judah officially becomes its own independent kingdom. And here's the key detail. It sticks with the royal line of David, ruling straight out of its capital city of Jerusalem. The kingdom of Judah mostly included the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, with some bits of Simeon eventually joining the party. Its base of operations, the rugged hill country just west of the Dead Sea where the Temple of Yahweh was located. The temple in Jerusalem wasn't just a spiritual hub, it was the beating heart of the nation, politically and religiously, for almost 400 years. Now, they weren't always free and clear. Judah spent a lot of its time as a vassal state, first under Egypt, then under the powerhouse Neo-Assyrian Empire, and finally under Babylon. But even through all that, the Davidic kings kept the throne, right up until Babylon showed up and took everything down in 586 BC. But that's a story for another day. Enter Hezekiah, born around 741 BC, son of King Ahaz. He takes the throne at just 25 years old, and historians usually mark the start of his solo reign in 715 BC. Hezekiah didn't waste any time. He launched a full-blown religious reform, tearing down the high places where people were worshiping outside the temple, restoring and reopening the temple itself, and seriously beefing up Jerusalem's defenses. We're talking real infrastructure projects here, like the Siloam Tunnel and the Broad Wall, because he knew that the Assyrians were coming. And sure enough, in 701 BC, the big moment arrives. Sennacherib, king of Assyria, rolls in to besiege Jerusalem. But here's the twist. He doesn't conquer it, he backs off. What if I told you the Assyrians recorded this event too, and their version is just as dramatic? Both the Bible and Assyrian records mention the siege, which is wild when you think about how rare it is to get both sides of the story from the ancient world. To understand why the Assyrians didn't conquer Jerusalem, we need to go back to Nineveh, the heart of an empire that never took no for an answer. In 705 BC, Sennacherib, the son and successor of Sargon II, becomes king, inheriting the largest empire in the ancient world of that time. He chooses Nineveh as his seat, transforming it into a palace without rival, complete with vast gardens, aqueducts, and sophisticated waterworks that amaze contemporaries and posterity alike. Between 703 and 689 BC, he leads 6 major campaigns, crushing rebellions in Babylonia and Elam, sacking Babylon in 689 BC. His mix of ruthless military strategy, grandiose building works, and administrative reforms ensured Assyria's place in world history. And we know this because one thing the Assyrians were really good at is keeping records. Again, this biblical story is unique because in it, we have the historical record of the Bible and the historical records of the Assyrians. What if I told you we have the Assyrian king's own words about this siege, etched in clay, still readable today? This is the Taylor Prism. It's one of 3 nearly identical 6-sided baked clay prisms inscribed with the annals of King Sennacherib of Assyria. Discovered in the early 1830s at Nineveh by Colonel Robert Taylor, it records Sennacherib's military campaigns, most famously the 701 BC siege of Jerusalem. Don't blink, because in just a few moments, I'll show you the siege tactic that left 185,000 soldiers dead. Making our way back over to the Levant, tensions were rising. As a condition of their subjugation, the vassal states of the Assyrian Empire were required to pay tribute to the king. Emboldened by Egyptian support, Sidon, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Judah refused to continue paying tribute. This act of defiance triggered Sennacherib's 3rd campaign, a strong military response to the unruly kings under his authority. This story wasn't just a biblical miracle, it was a geopolitical shockwave. Let's see how the Assyrians documented it. Beginning in the north of the lands known as Phoenicia and Philistia, Sennacherib began a systematic military campaign to restore order. His offer to the rebels was simple: either obey and pay tribute, or we'll tear your walls down, destroy everything you own, and replace your king with one that's loyal to the empire. Sennacherib's first stop was the Phoenician city-state of Sidon, where he laid siege to King Luli's forces and established a king loyal to the empire. The thought of the Assyrian Empire's might alone was enough to give Sennacherib victory, as history records that King Luli fled from Sidon due to Sennacherib's, quote, awesome splendor. After moving on from Sidon, the king faced little resistance. The prism that I mentioned earlier records that 8 Western kings submitted to Sennacherib without incident, marking his campaign in Phoenicia an utter success. The Syrian forces then made their way down into Philistia to Ashkelon, known for its significant stronghold. Sennacherib easily conquered the stronghold of Ashkelon, quickly conquering 4 cities in the north. Interestingly, history doesn't record a military conquest of Ashkelon. This is likely due to one of 2 reasons. Number 1, either King Sidka was handed over by his own people, or 2, he willingly surrendered to save his people from certain death. Either way, the city was restored to loyal obedience to the Assyrians. After Ashkelon, the emperor turned his attention to Ekron, another rebel city. The devastation at Ekron fully showcases the brutality of the Assyrians. Rebels from Ekron are said to have been impaled around their city to warn other potential rebels of the price of treachery. This marked another brutal victory for the empire and a crushing blow to the resistance movement. After this, the Assyrian records recount a battle at El Teka against a Nubian Egyptian force led by the Kushite king Tirhakah. This battle brought much glory to Sennacherib, as his forces were successful yet again. With all the momentum working in his favor, it's hard to imagine that anyone could stop Sennacherib from achieving all his objectives, especially not Judah. But wait a second, why was Judah so important anyways? Why travel halfway around the known world to depose a king of a seemingly insignificant kingdom? Surely there must have been a very good reason, due to the fact that so much space was given to the encounter in the Assyrian historical records. There was indeed something very special about Judah, and I'm willing to bet that you know exactly what it is. What's fascinating about this story is that it could be said that Sennacherib considered Hezekiah public enemy number 1. This is simply due to the fact that while Judah was small and King Hezekiah relatively insignificant on the world stage, Hezekiah served the one and true God, the rightful ruler over all the earth. Yahweh was the creator of the world, and though the kings of the world weren't aware of it, he was also in control of all world events. Blindly, Sennacherib swept into Judah like a storm. The Taylor prism suggests that the Assyrians conquered 46 cities in Judah, but this wasn't enough for Sennacherib, as he had his sights set on Jerusalem, the capital city, the city where the temple of Yahweh stood and from which Hezekiah ruled. Before he got to Jerusalem, there was one obstacle that stood in his way: the walled city of Lachish. Sennacherib laid siege to the city of Lachish and had his forces construct a massive siege ramp made of wood and stone and earth. Archaeological excavations at Lachish have uncovered the ramp, destruction layers of mud brick, Assyrian arrowheads, offering one of the clearest correlations between ancient texts and material evidence. After the construction of the siege ramp, the Assyrian army breached the wall and razed the city. 4 mass graves with over 1,500 remains were uncovered in the late 1930s. Sennacherib considered the overthrow of Lachish one of his crowning achievements. He was so impressed by his victory that, after returning home in the aftermath of his campaign, he had a massive relief erected in his throne room in Nineveh. This relief is currently on display in the British Museum in London, and with Lachish under his feet, there was just one more problem to tackle: the rebel king Hezekiah. Would you dare stand alone against the world's greatest army? Hezekiah did, and this is the moment that everything changed. Feeling the weight of Sennacherib's wrath, Hezekiah tried to make a deal. He sent a message to Sennacherib while he was at Lachish saying, "I have done wrong. I will pay whatever tribute money you demand if you will only withdraw." The king of Assyria returned a message demanding a settlement of 11 tons of silver and 1 ton of gold. Hezekiah, realizing that he was outmatched, agreed and went so far as stripping the gold from the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord in order to pay his tribute. This should have been the end of the matter, but Sennacherib still wasn't satisfied. The emperor sent a delegation of officials to the walls of Jerusalem. Hezekiah sent out 3 of his officials to speak with them. The Assyrian king's chief of staff shouted, "This is what the great king of Assyria says. What are you trusting in that makes you so confident?" The chief of staff was attempting to get the people of Judah to abandon their king out of fear. He went on to say, "This is what the king says. Don't let Hezekiah deceive you. He will never be able to rescue you from my power." Now, it's one thing to insult Hezekiah. However, the chief of staff made one of the biggest mistakes in history by publicly insulting Hezekiah's God. The chief of staff said, "Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord by saying, 'The Lord will surely deliver us, and this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria.'" He went on to say, "Do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying, 'The Lord will deliver us.' Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria?" From the chief of staff's perspective, this was a valid argument. No one else was able to withstand the might of the Assyrians. "Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand?" After this, Hezekiah's palace administrator, court secretary, and royal historian brought him the message delivered by the Assyrians. When Hezekiah heard the message, he tore his clothes and covered himself in sackcloth and went to the temple of Yahweh. And this is the point in which the whole story begins to shift. When Hezekiah humbled himself, things began to change. The king sent his officials to the prophet Isaiah. The prophet already had a word from the Lord ready for Hezekiah. Isaiah said, "Say to your master, 'Thus says the Lord, do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have reviled me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him so that he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land, and I will make him fall by the sword in his own land." From Lachish, Sennacherib sent messengers to Hezekiah, once again defying the Lord. "Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you by promising that Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria." In just a few seconds, I'll show you why this isn't just history. It's proof that faith can move mountains. But wait a second, did we just read that right? Did Sennacherib call God a liar? Yeah, big mistake. When Hezekiah received this message, he went to the temple of Yahweh and spread out the letter before the Lord. And he cried out, "O Lord our God, save us, please, from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Lord, are God alone." This is the kind of faith that gets God's attention. The Lord sent another message to Hezekiah through the prophet Isaiah. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, your prayer to me about Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard. Therefore, thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield, or cast up a siege mount against it, for I will defend this city to save it, for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David." Sennacherib, without fear of God, brought his forces from Lachish to Jerusalem, intending to lay siege to the city and overthrow Hezekiah, but it wasn't meant to be. That night, the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 soldiers in the camp of the Assyrians, rendering them utterly powerless. Shocked and defeated, Sennacherib and what remained of his diminished forces made their way back to Nineveh. What's so fascinating about this story is the fact that most of the biblical account is supported by the Assyrian historical records. Sennacherib's conquest of Phoenicia, Philistia, and most of Judah, including the stronghold of Lachish, is recorded. The Taylor Prism, constructed to record the military conquest of Sennacherib, says, "As for Hezekiah, I shut him up like a caged bird in his royal city of Jerusalem. I then constructed a series of fortresses around him and did not allow anyone to come out of the city gates." This he did indeed, but unlike all the other kings and kingdoms that Sennacherib conquered, Judah was the only one to stand. This was quite literally a David and Goliath story. The greatest empire on earth versus a comparatively small and weak kingdom. There's no reason that the Assyrians should have had any trouble defeating Hezekiah in Jerusalem, but they never got the chance because the God of heaven and earth personally protected the city. The Bible just has one last thing to say about Sennacherib. After he went back to Nineveh in defeat, as he was worshiping in the house of his God, 2 of his sons unalived him in cold blood, just as the Lord prophesied through the prophet Isaiah. Now let me say to you, this story isn't just any story. It's a historical reminder of this fact. With God, all things are possible. When you're facing life's greatest challenges, things that are completely beyond your ability to control, know this: our God is able to deliver you. If God could stop the mightiest army in the world because of one king's prayer, what could he do with your prayer today? If you'll humble yourself by turning to him in prayer, he'll fight your battles and defeat your enemies just as he did for Hezekiah. I pray that your life will be enriched by this knowledge and that it will serve as a reminder of the grace that's available to you every day. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And we'll see you in the next one.